He thought he was just playing piano at work, until the CEO froze, hearing the melody her first love wrote for her. The hotel lobby was quiet that morning, the kind of quiet that made every note of the piano resonate through the marble floors. I had arrived early, as usual, balancing the rhythm of my son's morning routine with the long commute. My fingers hovered over the keys, stretching them like a warm-up before a performance, and I let my thoughts drift, thinking about breakfast, bills, and the little victories that made my life feel steady. The lobby was bathed in soft, golden light filtering through the tall windows. The chandeliers hung like silent witnesses to the world outside, casting gentle reflections on the polished surfaces. I began to play simple scales, small melodies that warmed the air but required no audience. It was routine, soothing, a quiet corner of the day where nothing complicated could intrude. And then she appeared. She walked past the grand piano, heels clicking softly on the marble, but it was her presence that made the room change. Confident, polished, every movement precise. Yet beneath that surface lay a vulnerability I could sense without understanding. Her eyes flicked toward the piano, and for the briefest moment, they held something I couldn't place. Recognition, perhaps, or a memory that caught her by surprise. She didn't speak. She didn't stop. But I felt the pull of her gaze, a quiet gravity that made my chest tighten. I tried to keep my fingers moving, focusing on the keys, but it was impossible to ignore her. The melody that emerged was unplanned, an instinctive string of notes that I had never played for anyone before. Something about the way she paused, the way her hand brushed against the piano's polished edge, suggested that the music meant more to her than a casual observer could ever know. The lobby seemed to shrink around us. The soft hum of the piano mingled with the subtle scent of polished wood and fresh flowers, creating a fragile cocoon. Even the usual hotel bustle, the distant hum of elevators, the occasional shuffle of staff, felt muted, as if time itself had slowed in recognition of this moment. I noticed the slight catch in her breath, the way her shoulders stiffened briefly, and the small, almost imperceptible widening of her eyes. My heart thumped unexpectedly fast, not from nerves or anticipation, but from the sudden, unspoken connection between us. Here was someone whose life had clearly been vast and carefully controlled. Yet in this instant, she seemed caught, exposed, and alive in a way that startled me. When our eyes met, it lasted just long enough to make my chest ache. There was no introduction, no explanation, just a silent acknowledgement. Her presence seemed to reach into the notes I was playing, coloring each one with memories and emotions I couldn't name. I realized then that this was no ordinary audience, no fleeting glance. This was the beginning of something that would change both of our lives, quietly but irrevocably. I kept playing, letting the melody rise and fall naturally, aware that this simple act, fingers on keys, heart open, music filling the space, was the first step into a world I didn't yet understand but already wanted to explore. She lingered for a moment longer, watching, before stepping away, leaving me with the echo of her presence, the first flutter of a connection I knew would not fade. After that first morning, the hotel lobby never felt quite the same. The chandeliers still gleamed, the marble floors still reflected light, but the air seemed charged now, almost expectant. I arrived early as usual, balancing my thoughts between my son's homework and the music I loved to play. But there was a new anticipation threading through the quiet. It happened that afternoon. I was rehearsing a new piece, fingers gliding over the piano keys with careful precision, when I noticed her again. She appeared as if by chance, walking past the grand piano under the pretense of checking in for a meeting. But the way she paused, subtly yet deliberately, made me realize she was here for more than business. As I played, I let my hands wander over the keys, and instinctively, I touched upon a melody I hadn't thought about in years. A simple, haunting tune that had come from a dusty sheet of music my father had once given me. I had never shared it with anyone. I didn't know why I played it now. Perhaps it was the light in her eyes, the way she lingered, or simply the quiet intimacy of the room. The moment the first notes reached her, she froze. It was subtle at first. Her breathing changed, her fingers brushing against the edge of the piano as if to steady herself. Then her eyes widened slightly, and I caught the flicker of a memory she couldn't hide. Recognition, surprise, something tender, almost fragile, fluttered across her expression. My fingers hesitated over the keys, sensing the weight of the moment. Her gaze met mine for just an instant, but it felt heavy, loaded with history and emotion neither of us could yet name. There was no explanation, no immediate conversation, only the resonance of the music and the silent acknowledgement that passed between us. My pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the startling awareness that this melody, which had been just a memory to me, held a life of its own in her. Over the next few days, she returned under various professional pretenses. Each time, she lingered, eyes drawn to the piano, shoulders slightly tense, lips pressed into a faint line of concentration or nostalgia. I began to notice patterns, the subtle tapping of her fingers, the way she would tilt her head as if trying to hear something only she could sense, the tiny exhale she let slip when no one was looking. And I noticed the effect it had on me. Every glance from her, every moment she lingered in proximity, felt electric. My fingers tingled when I played, aware that each note carried weight beyond its melody. The room, once just a professional space, had become intimate without words, a place where memory and emotion intertwined. One afternoon, she reached out to adjust the sheet music I had set on the piano stand. Our fingers brushed, lingering a moment longer than necessary. The warmth of her skin against mine, the brief contact, left a quiet echo, something unspoken but deeply felt. I could feel her pulse, subtle yet insistent, and it sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. Music had become our language before we had spoken. Every note I played seemed to pull her closer, every pause filled with unspoken curiosity and silent longing. It was in these small, delicate moments, the brushing of hands, the shared glances, the music between us, that a connection was forming, fragile but undeniable, ready to grow into something neither of us could yet name. By the third week, her presence had become almost a quiet rhythm in my day. I noticed it even before she arrived, an anticipation in the way my fingers hovered over the piano keys, a subtle tension in my shoulders, a heightened awareness of every sound in the lobby. She moved through the hotel as if she belonged nowhere and everywhere at once. Poised, elegant, commanding attention without needing to, yet always carrying an air of careful restraint. One afternoon, as I practiced a softer, more reflective piece, I caught her pausing at the doorway. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her gaze rested on me in that way that made everything else fade. The bustling staff, the distant chatter of guests, even the echo of the piano itself. Her eyes softened, flickered, then hardened slightly, as if recalling something she had tried to bury long ago. I felt my chest tighten. Every note I played now carried weight beyond the melody, as if it were a conversation between us, unspoken yet profoundly understood. I noticed the subtle movements she made, the way her fingers lightly traced the piano's edge, the gentle shift of her shoulders, the quiet inhale that hinted at a memory too vivid to ignore. Each gesture made her presence feel both immediate and untouchable, an intoxicating combination that I couldn't name. I began noticing patterns. Certain melodies would draw a reaction from her. A soft sigh, a slight pause, the faraway look in her eyes. Other times, she would linger near the piano, watching me carefully while pretending to check her phone or her schedule. It was clear she was listening, analyzing, and remembering something that only she could hear. I could feel her emotions without her needing to speak them aloud. And then there were the moments of direct contact, subtle, almost accidental. One day, as I adjusted the sheet music, her hand brushed mine. The touch was brief, but long enough to make me acutely aware of the warmth of her skin, the gentle pressure of her fingers. My heartbeat quickened, and I felt a shiver travel up my spine. Neither of us pulled away immediately. Instead, we lingered in the moment, fully aware of the silent electricity that had passed between us. Despite the growing tension, I struggled with hesitation. She was older, powerful, and refined, a world apart from mine. I reminded myself constantly that this was professional space, that I had responsibilities, that the age difference and social gap should keep me distant. And yet, the hesitation only made the moments when we were close feel more intense, more precious. Every glance, every brush of a hand, every shared silence carried weight I couldn't ignore. Her glances grew bolder, subtle but undeniable. She would catch my eye and hold it a moment too long, tilting her head slightly, lips curving in the faintest half-smile. And each time I found myself responding in kind, leaning slightly closer while maintaining the fragile line of propriety. The music, once a simple accompaniment to my routine, had become a bridge between us. A language that allowed us to speak, to connect, to feel without words. And as the days passed, the unspoken tension built into something undeniable. A delicate, thrilling pull between us, charged with emotion, desire, and the fear of crossing the line we both felt hovering just out of reach. Every note, every glance, every hesitant brush of skin was a step toward something neither of us could yet name, but neither of us wanted to stop. It was late afternoon when the lobby finally emptied, leaving only the golden light spilling through the tall windows and the soft echo of the piano in the quiet space. She had stayed after her usual business appointments, lingering near the piano under some pretense I no longer doubted. I noticed the slight tremor in her fingers as she adjusted a decorative vase on the nearby table, a tension she tried and failed to mask. "Can I ask you something?" she said, her voice low, hesitant. It wasn't the confident, controlled tone of a CEO commanding attention. This was vulnerability, delicate and unpracticed. I nodded, keeping my fingers poised above the keys. I haven't heard this song in years," she admitted, glancing down at the sheet music I had placed earlier. "It was written for me, a long time ago, by someone I used to love. And now, you play it as if you know every note of my heart." Her words hung in the air, soft but heavy. I didn't speak immediately. Instead, I let the music continue, playing the melody slowly, letting each note breathe. There was something sacred in the silence that followed. The way the piano keys carried her memories, her emotions, without the need for words. "I wasn't expecting this," she continued, finally letting her gaze meet mine. I thought I had buried it, that the feelings were long gone. But hearing it now," her voice faltered, the smallest catch in her throat revealing more than she intended. "It's like being reminded of a part of myself I lost." I stayed silent, simply listening. I didn't offer platitudes or explanations, only my presence. She needed someone steady, someone who could hold the space with her without pushing, without judgment. And in that moment, I realized that music had become more than a melody. It was a bridge to her past, a conduit for trust and intimacy. Her hands moved, unconsciously brushing against mine as she adjusted the sheet music again. The contact was brief but deliberate, a shared acknowledgement that she was letting me in. I felt the warmth of her fingers, the faint pulse beneath her skin, and I understood the fragility of the moment. This was not just nostalgia. This was a door opening between two people, one long closed, the other newly attentive. "I've been so careful," she admitted, her voice softer now, almost a whisper. "Careful not to let anyone see this side of me. But with you, I feel like I can. Like I don't have to hide the part of me that loved and lost." The room seemed to hold its breath as she spoke. Her confession wasn't dramatic or forced. It was quiet, human, and painfully real. I reached out, gently resting my hand near hers on the piano bench, offering a steady presence without intrusion. She allowed her fingers to rest against mine for a fleeting moment, and that simple act, the touch, the trust, the unspoken understanding, felt more profound than any words we could have exchanged. For the first time, the gap between us, age, experience, social status, felt irrelevant. All that mattered was the quiet intimacy we had created, built on vulnerability and the resonance of shared music. The song continued under my fingers, each note carrying her confession, each pause filled with understanding. And in that quiet, golden afternoon, I realized something undeniable. Trust had been formed, fragile but unbreakable, and something far deeper than admiration or curiosity was beginning to grow between us. A connection that could not be ignored, even if neither of us yet knew its full depth. After her confession, the hotel lobby never felt quite the same. The music lingered longer in the air, and so did she. She returned more often under professional pretenses, yet each visit carried a subtle shift, an unspoken expectation, a quiet curiosity, a willingness to remain a little longer than necessary. The piano had become our private stage, and the world around it blurred into soft background noise, insignificant compared to the rhythm of shared glances and whispered melodies. One late afternoon, I was practicing a slower variation of the song she loved. The lobby was nearly empty, save for a few staff members moving quietly in the distance. She approached the piano without announcing herself, her steps lighter than usual, as if she didn't want to disturb the delicate thread connecting the notes between us. "Could you play it again?" she asked softly, her voice carrying that vulnerability that had surfaced before. But slower this time. "I want to remember it fully." I nodded, adjusting the sheet music and sliding onto the piano bench beside her. Our knees brushed slightly. The contact was brief, almost accidental, yet it sent an unexpected warmth through me. She didn't flinch. Instead, she remained close, her presence both grounding and electrifying. The tension between us was subtle, unspoken, yet it hummed through the air like the low resonance of the piano itself. As I played, she leaned forward, hands resting lightly on the edge of the keys, listening with an intensity that made every note feel heavier with meaning. Occasionally, our hands hovered near each other while I adjusted the sheet music, and each brush of skin left a small spark of awareness in its wake. My pulse quickened with each accidental touch, and I caught myself stealing glances at her face. So composed, so elegant, yet softened by memory and emotion. The melody flowed slowly, carefully, and with each note, a kind of intimacy unfolded between us. I could feel the subtle rhythm of her breathing, the way her shoulders relaxed when the music reached its most tender passages, the slight catch in her throat when a particularly nostalgic chord lingered. There was no need for words. The music spoke for us, revealing longing, curiosity, and the quiet pull of two hearts recognizing one another. At one point, I paused, fingers resting lightly on the keys. She leaned just slightly closer, her arm brushing mine. Neither of us moved away. There was a moment of shared hesitation, acknowledging the attraction, but restrained by caution, respect, and the fragile tension of circumstance. Her gaze met mine, steady and searching, and I saw a mixture of emotions: surprise, longing, and the delicate fear of being drawn too close. "Thank you for understanding this song," she whispered, voice soft, almost shy. "For letting me feel it without rushing it, without judgment." I simply nodded, words unnecessary. Instead, I let the music continue, our closeness unspoken but palpable. The simple act of sitting side by side, fingers nearly touching the piano, breathing the same quiet air, had become a ritual of intimacy. By the time she finally rose to leave, neither of us moved quickly to break the moment. We lingered in the shared space, aware that this closeness was fragile, rare, and precious. Every glance, every touch, every lingering pause had woven a bond deeper than either of us could yet articulate. In that quiet afternoon, it became clear. The music had drawn us together, but the moments of proximity, subtle, tender, human, were what made the heart begin to open. We were stepping closer, one hesitant note at a time, toward something real. The tension between us had been building for weeks, unspoken yet undeniable, a quiet force threading through every glance, every brush of a hand, every lingering pause beside the piano. Each time she returned to hear the song, each time our fingers nearly touched as I adjusted the sheet music, it became harder to ignore. And yet, neither of us had dared to name it until that evening. The hotel lobby was empty, the warm glow of sunset spilling across the marble floors. I had just finished rehearsing the melody one more time, letting the notes linger in the quiet air. She appeared as I was gathering my things, not under the guise of business, but with a subtle hesitation that betrayed her intentions. Her eyes met mine, steady yet searching, and for a moment, the world outside the piano's resonance ceased to exist. "Can we talk?" she asked softly. Her voice was vulnerable, stripped of the usual confidence she carried like armor. I nodded, motioning toward the piano bench. We sat side by side, shoulders brushing lightly. Accidental yet deliberate, a closeness we both felt but didn't force. The music had stopped, leaving only the echo of our shared presence. "I need to be honest," I began, my fingers drumming lightly against the edge of the keys. "I care about you, more than I should. And I know this is complicated, our lives, our ages, everything. But I can't pretend I don't notice you, that I don't feel drawn to you." She looked down for a moment, then back at me, her eyes glistening in the fading light. I feel it too," she admitted, voice trembling slightly. "I've been so careful, so guarded. I thought no one could see through the walls I've built. But you make it feel safe to want something again, to feel something real." We sat in silence, the kind that isn't awkward but full of weight, anticipation, and understanding. I reached out slowly, resting my hand lightly near hers on the piano bench. She hesitated, then allowed her fingers to brush against mine. The touch was tentative, almost shy, yet it carried warmth and trust. It was not dramatic, not forced, just a quiet acknowledgement that we were both standing on the edge of something we had been too cautious to name. "I don't want to rush," she said softly, leaning slightly into the space between us. "I need to take it slowly, to see where this goes without losing myself again." "Neither do I," I replied. "We'll take it one step at a time, together." Her lips curved into a small, relieved smile, and she rested her head lightly on my shoulder as if testing the comfort of our closeness. I could feel the gentle warmth of her hair against my collarbone, the faint rhythm of her breathing syncing with mine. There was no pressure, no urgency, just the quiet decision to be honest, to be present, to let ourselves feel without fear. The music, once a bridge between memory and emotion, now became a backdrop to trust and choice. Every note I had played for her before had led to this moment, but nothing in those melodies compared to the weight of what we had admitted to one another. By the time the sun had fully set, we were still sitting there, hands lightly intertwined, the silent promise between us stronger than any words. We had chosen honesty over fear, vulnerability over caution. And in that choice, something deep, tender, and real had begun. A slow-burning connection neither of us could ignore. Weeks passed, each day layering subtle shifts in our connection. The hotel lobby, once a space of routine and careful professionalism, now felt alive with quiet intimacy. She arrived less out of necessity and more out of desire, and I played the piano not merely for the guests but for the moments we shared, moments that had become a rhythm of their own. The melody she loved remained at the center, but the silence between the notes now carried the weight of understanding, trust, and unspoken affection. It was a late afternoon when the final pieces of hesitation finally fell away. The sunlight poured through the tall windows, bathing the room in gold, highlighting the soft lines of her face, the gentle curve of her hands resting lightly on the piano. My son had been visiting for the weekend, laughing quietly in the background as he built a small fort with pillows. She watched him for a moment, her eyes softening, and I realized I was seeing a side of her that few ever did. Completely at ease, genuinely warm, and alive. I moved closer to the piano bench, sliding into the space beside her. Our shoulders brushed lightly, as they had countless times before, yet now it felt different. Not a hesitant experiment in proximity, but a natural alignment of two people who had chosen to be near each other. The gentle warmth of her skin, the faint pulse beneath her fingers, the quiet rise and fall of her breathing. All of it was familiar, comforting, and safe. "I never imagined it could feel like this," she whispered, eyes tracking the gentle movements of my son. "Like, I can finally just be." "You're not alone anymore," I said softly, letting my fingers rest briefly against hers. "And you never have to be." The room seemed to respond to us, holding the quiet intimacy as though the hotel itself recognized the change. The chandeliers reflected the sunlight in gentle patterns across the floor, but there was no need for grand gestures or dramatic scenery. The connection between us was subtle, real, and entirely ours. We began to move together naturally in the shared space, walking slowly side by side, leaning close when discussing sheet music, exchanging small touches that were neither rushed nor desperate. Each gesture was deliberate in its gentleness, a reaffirmation that we were building something lasting. She laughed more freely now, and I watched her regain the lightness she had lost long ago. Later, as evening settled, we returned to the piano. The song she had loved for so long played softly, but the notes now carried a new weight. The promise of care, the tenderness of trust, the beginnings of love. She rested her hand lightly in mine, fingers interlacing almost instinctively, and I felt the steady warmth of her heart echoing against my own. No words were needed. The harmony of our hands, our shared breath, and the music was enough. We had crossed the boundaries of age, experience, and circumstance, but none of it mattered. What mattered was the choice we had made, to be present, to be honest, and to allow our hearts to heal and grow together. As the last rays of sunlight faded, she leaned her head against my shoulder. My fingers brushed the edge of her hair, and I felt a quiet peace settle over us. We had started with a melody, moved through hesitations and confessions, and arrived here, together, whole, and ready to face whatever came next. For the first time in years, she smiled without restraint, and I felt the music in the room reflect the harmony we had found. Not in notes alone, but in hearts intertwined. If this slow burn, age gap romance touched your heart, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to never miss a story of love, healing, and unexpected connections. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if a melody from your past suddenly returned?